And welcome to another episode of This American Negro. This American Negro is a podcast that aims to bridge academia in the hood. Shout out to everybody who tuned into last week or 2 weeks ago. It was last week. Last week's episode where we talked about redefining urban education, especially in the digital space. A lot of positive reception from that episode, just from the education community and just in general. So I appreciate everybody who interacted. Shout out to Fade for coming on and speaking with me as well. Other than that, different ways to support this podcast. You can subscribe to my Patreon. So that's just a minimum commitment of $2 a month. And that is where you can get a little bit more exclusive content. So on there, I'll have exclusive videos, drops that drop before the rest of everything else. But I also understand we in the midst of the Rona and we on timeout. So don't feel obligated to support me monetarily. But if you want to support me non-monetarily, you can also just go and share this podcast, teach somebody how to use a podcast, like and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. Leave me a rate and review as well. And, just let people know when you're listening because it's pretty dope. So I never know whose eyes will lay on this. So I appreciate anybody and everybody who's been supporting through this time around. Is that all the administrative stuff? If you're new here, my name is Marquise. I'm an educator, content creator, social media strategist, all that fun stuff. Yeah, I think that's everything. If not, I'll have it in the description box down below. Y'all know the deal. But we're getting into this new episode, and I've been waiting to get this guest on. I met him on Twitter and just was like, wow, he's really chatting some real shit and unapologetically doing so. And I just appreciated all the content and the way you not only challenged me, but this person challenges everybody else, challenges Black men to do better, but always has liberation at the forefront of everything that he puts out. Also, he's like real big in the Black wrestling community. I don't dabble in the wrestling community, but I somehow managed to like infiltrate my way in, and I met a lot of people who just enjoy wrestling from Black men. So I was like, all right, well, somehow I got into that niche of Black Twitter. But please give a warm introduction to Lorenzo, Lo, Ed, whatever you decide to go by, man.
Listen, man, I'm Lorenzo. I'm very comfortable with Lo because that's what everybody in Philly called me. So Lo is definitely perfect. If you family, then Lo is perfect.
Right.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you for having me.
Nah, thank you for coming on. First and foremost, I know I gave all the introductions and all the accolades and shit, but for people who are new to you and my audience being new to you, can you tell them a little bit about yourself? What do you do? What motivates you? And what you hope to do and other platforms that you're on?
Absolutely. So I just want to start from the wrestling thing, and just if I could just start from there real quick, just some real quick stuff. I really appreciate that. Was a compliment you kind of gave me when you said real big on Black wrestling Twitter. I definitely take it, man. That was
I really think so. From the outside looking in, I'm just like, oh, he's really talking some shit. Causing like a little disruption out here.
Man, it's quite the disruption, man. But it's fun. It's all in fun, and it's challenging, right? As you said. So that's my main mission. But for sure, wrestling is definitely one of those things I enjoy. I've enjoyed it since I was a kid. Real big into sports and all of that extracurricular stuff. But when it comes to the important stuff, on Twitter and Instagram, my name is Lorenzo Forreal. But absolutely to just come out and to be on a platform like this for me is just really important because I get to actually really talk about my mission and what it is that I really do. So my name is Lorenzo Pierce Cannon-Umstead. That is my full name. I'm a young man from West Philadelphia. I'm 27 years of age at this point, and you can pretty much say I've been a community organizer in the city of Philadelphia pretty much since I was about a teenager, maybe as early as about 13, 14 years old, just starting out really small at certain churches, helping out food banks, soup kitchens, all types of just different stuff. I just wanted to get my hands into to just help the people of this community and the city because it's one that I love. And just through the years, just mastered, just different areas of just giving back, I feel like, and just organizing. And just try to take that into other places. In 2012, I served as a staffer, a field organizer for the Obama campaign for his reelection in 2012. And that was definitely a really eye-opening experience to just the whole democratic process and how it relates to community organizing in a way.
Right.
And then since that time, just being, I guess, introduced to more radical spaces, and just more radical ways of politicizing ourselves as Black people. So just involve myself within the city in any way I can is pretty much what I've done. It's been kind of wide range, and it's been like so many titles, and I really, it's really interesting when you're throwing all your titles out there, but really community organizer, I think, is one that just like sums it up. And I just, I really, all the credit really goes to the community because, it's they're the people that like support us and we support them at the same time. That relationship is really why I do what I do. Yeah, so just, that's me, and just being on this platform is really cool. And I definitely appreciate you again.
Of course. Nah, seriously. Thank you for being here. And I think community organizer definitely is very all-encompassing of the work that you do too. Even like not only just from like a physical space, but also the digital space as well. I think you're curating a really cool community that it's just cool to just witness and be part of as well. So thank you for the stuff that you also curate in the digital space.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, definitely. So we're going to get into this conversation today, and this topic's really going to just talk about the use of Black art and as it leads to Black liberation and what that looks like. And I really just wanted to start from this one quote that always like stood out to me because my background's really in theater and my background's in dance and broadcasting and stuff. So I'm always like, storytelling to me is always like something that can really like push an agenda, but also push people to think a lot differently. I always think is a really good introductory topic into things. I didn't realize like this is something I really was passionate about until college, and just realizing like, oh, theater and acting is like some of the purest storytelling because it's oratory. You have to talk through it. You have to like have this connection with your audience, but you have to keep telling the story over and over again. It made me think about how Black people have always have to be like oral tradition of storytelling. We have to always talk things out. So it also made me think like, oh shit, like I get to put on these plays that cause this conversation and a dialogue, and people get to digest it in a very particular fashion. So as I was thinking more about having you on, I kind of also like interrogated the stuff that I was doing growing up and how I utilized art to kind of make sense of the world. And as I came into this quote from Sonia Sanchez in 1985, she said, "Black art is dangerous. Black art controls the Negro reality, negates negative influences, and creates positive images." And I thought that was like really powerful just in terms of the conversation we're going to be having today. So can you kind of give us like a brief overview of why you think Black art, media, film, and everything can be used as a tool of liberation? And then from there, we'll start dicing up this conversation a little bit more and add a nuance to it.
For sure. And thank you for those quotes and just for that opening as well, because there's a lot of powerful stuff in there. But storytelling, I think, is really key and essential, especially for any marginalized group. That's in a certain space that's unlike the space that they were intended to be in. Because when it comes to that, we've been separated from those things. We've been separated from a lot of the things that was essential to us. Now, not to say that a lot hasn't been held on to by the time we arrived to this land.
Right.
Because a lot that we do is really spiritual, and it's really first nature, right? Just some of the things we do, the way we dance, the way we move, the way we speak, even speaking the colonizer's language that is English, you can hear the Blackness when we speak. It's period, right? It is what it is. But since we've been separated from so much, I think now that we're in this different space, storytelling about our past or that future, right, that we desire, what that might be like, imagining, right, but thinking about the past and where we come from. And I just think it's just really important because of that separation, right? Because it's like, because we've been separated from so much, boom, there's like it's like 1,000,001 stories that we can tell now because of that separation, right? So when you think about us arriving to the Americas, right, all of them, because you look at us, we landed on more than just North America, right? We're in Central America, we're in South America, because slavery didn't end in Brazil until 1888, right? And it was the last to abolish it,
right?
And the country that inhabits the most people of African descent, right? So just looking at all of these factors, it's like, wow. So boom, we get to these new lands, and you think about what our ancestors went through, and you know, everything about these people, what their names were, you know, where they came from on their original land, where they were native to. You know, all of these things are essential for us to learn in the space that we're in, so we can continue to just know who we are as a people, and then, you know,
Right.
pass that down to the later generations. Um, and when we think about film and all of these different mediums, right? You know, when we think about media and the way it was invented, right, in this country, and the advertising industry and all of these different things, and us using that to our advantage, and knowing that, like, you know, the purpose of media is to either, you know, inform, right, entertain, or
Right.
persuade. And all media messages are constructed, right? And based on those things about, like, no American media as they were, I think we as Black people kind of take that and make that our own. So we definitely want to inform our people and entertain, but we might want to persuade them a little bit more positively to what a more positive message is, right?
Right.
So just those different things, man, I just think are very key and very important. Just for us to just hold our head and just continue to know who we are as a people, especially in this time, in this day and time, right? With just the rampant, you know, we saw when Obama was in office where the country was,
Right.
and, you know, just culturally, right? And now we're thinking about some of these other things that's popping up culturally, you know, that pretty much come from the civil rights movement, or
Yeah.
before then, around World War II, right? Some of those things that was being said around then, and we look at what's going on, right? And so I just think more than ever, it's very important to just keep telling these stories, and just keep writing, and just keep creating, because it's not all we have, right?
Right.
But it's most of it, right? If, you know,
Right.
if I'm allowed to say that, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, I think that's that. You really laid that out really well too, especially just starting with a timeline and just seeing how we started, and then just getting up till today, and like the purpose of media too. I think that's
Yeah.
important to always define. So thank you for doing so. But even then, we'll start real simple. Like,
Yeah.
what is a film or a piece of art? What is that first piece that you remember actually speaking to you and almost like inciting like that switch in your mind? Like, oh, that activated something in me, and I don't know
Mhm.
what that is yet, but it makes me want to either create more art, or you've responded to it in a way where you're like, I can be more than what the world told me I could be.
I definitely think it was Malcolm X, Spike Lee's Malcolm. And if I may, just a quick disclaimer. You know, it's you know, I really want to give Spike Lee all the accolades that he's due, that he's earned, and all of these things, right? And for what he's done. But it was just a lot of things being said in, like, certain circles about Malcolm X and why it was produced, and who it was really for, and some of the things in that film might not have been for the Black people. A film that I will still turn on and watch and continue to critique to this day. Won't critique it now,
Right.
but I will say, I will just put that out there about the film. Just that quick disclaimer. But as a child, definitely it was Spike's Malcolm. When I now, you know, this film came out in November, or like December '92. And '92
Yeah.
is the year I was born. And I remember being a kid and seeing, like, you know, this is now like 95, 96. I remember seeing like a lot of like X, like, snapbacks. A lot of dudes wearing X snapbacks, or like Malcolm X shirts with this guy with glasses on it. And, you know, you get to be like a little older, and you kind of know about the people from the past, and you know that you learn that you're Black and all of these things.
Right.
And as a kid, like, I was raised Christian, right? I was raised Catholic, actually,
Mhm.
right? And I went to Catholic school for 12 years. And, you know, you hear about Martin Luther King and my friend Martin and all of these things. But I remember, you know, by the time I turned like 7 or 8, I can remember back to when I was about like 4 and 5 and 6, and I would see certain scenes. You know, I would see this Black guy in glasses, and he would be like talking. He was talking to like arenas full of people, and just like different vague memories of, like, you know, this my folks watching this film with like this
Right.
Black man on the news, this Black man giving a lecture at a college. I'm like, what is going on, right? So I get kind of older, and I come to realize, okay, like, this is like Malcolm X, you know, this is the Spike Lee biopic. And I'm like, oh, like, it's a Malcolm X biopic that was made in '92? Like, bet, like,
Right.
I'm in. So it's funny, because ironically, I asked for the DVD for Christmas. It was like an ironic thing, right? Like, you know what I mean? But what you had said about the world telling you what you could do. Because again, I'm thinking that like, you know, as black men, like it's important that like we be, you know, at least that's what I'm taught. Because again, I went to Catholic school for 12 years.
Right.
I thought like the image of Christianity and all of these things was like most important for black men because, you know, of the plight of black men, right? And just all of those things, right? And I kind of did become radicalized when watching that film a little bit and began to, you know, figure out about this man's life that he wasn't really like perfect, and learning about the Nation of Islam and everything that was going on with that, you know, liberation theology for black people at that time in the 60s. And just really, it was like mind blowing, man. And you know, and just, you know, it was a long movie, you know, but it flew in terms of like, because I was just always stuck to the screen, but it definitely was Malcolm, right? And I think that was it's funny because I posted a short from Malcolm on the timeline today. It's the scene where Elijah Muhammad, you know, pours the ink into the water, and you see, he says, if you give people, you know, dirty, inky water, that's what they're going to accept. But if you give them a glass of clean water and you keep pouring them that clean water, you give that to the people, they're going to accept that too. And it'll be better than the dirty water, right? So, and essentially, that was the scene that like made me like, I wanted to major in media because of that, and I did. You know what I mean? And so yeah, definitely Malcolm X, man. Very, you know, profound film of my youth. And the other thing I did learn about the man's life, you know, beyond that movie, still definitely viable, and I still study Malcolm to this day for sure. But definitely, you know, Spike's Malcolm for sure.
Nah, and I appreciate you explaining all of that, especially in depth, because I think that's important too. Is like trying to figure out, like, even that you said 4, 5, 6, these images were still like, you like, I know I saw this before. I don't know why, but something resonates. And I think that's really powerful because the way that even at younger ages, trying to figure out like, what is this thing and why is this so familiar? And sometimes we never like connect them until later in life. So thank you for sharing that a lot. But something else that you talk about is the clip that you posted today. And in that is feeding them the dirty water or the clean water and stuff like that. So even as we get into more of today and more critiquing, because I think there is always like a space to create art that's intended to liberate, right? But I think, especially today, I always find myself going back and forth with almost like the performative nature of different films that are out now too. And so we see Black as Fuck and seeing what's going on with that and the conversation around that. We see Clean and Slim and the conversation that ended up happening around that. And for you, where do you think the state of current Black art is at? Do you think it's more so pandering and it's too infiltrated by the white gaze? Or do you think we're in a good space right now from back in the day till present day?
I think it's a very nuanced conversation for sure.
Absolutely.
Because I think there's definitely more than one and two things going on at once. And when you look at like the greater scope of like who gets like put on, right? And like what, you know, what programs or what like pieces of media, depending on the subject matter, are like put on. So starting from, I want to start with Insecure, right?
Right.
I really enjoy Insecure, man.
I really enjoy it.
I really because it's funny, because I remember like, again, being a kid, and like, it's funny because now like I'm re-binging Living Single. You know, yeah, man, on Hulu.
Hulu, yep.
Yes. And it like, you know, Living Single, like some of this stuff as an adult, like it makes you feel good, because I mean, this stuff was on back in the day, but like being an adult and now like really having to deal with these things of like relationships and friendships and love and like living somewhere and like, you know, and find, you know, these conclusions that like Khadijah and them coming to, like, it's like, man, like I really wish I was an adult when this was like live on television, you know? But yeah, but I'm sorry, I'm kind of getting sidetracked. But
no, I think it's all gonna add
up. but starting with a show like Insecure present day, I really enjoy, because again, just because of those themes, right, and because of what's being expressed, and then thinking about like someone like Issa and seeing her grind from Awkward Black Girl days to then like Awkward Black Girl I Am Other days to now having the HBO deal. And we think about like other shows that's been on HBO that's really been boof, right? That like they ran seasons and they, you know, like Girls, right? And we see that like Insecure like trumps something like Girls. So something like Insecure and like the audience that like is into that, like, I think they're definitely being fed in a way.
Right.
And I think there's some people that watch Insecure that may have some critiques of it, that it may need a little bit more of this, or this should have been subtracted, or something like that, right? And then we talk about like Kenya Barris's brand, right? Like the Blackish brand with like Mixedish and Grownish, and now with the Black as Fuck spinoff that's now on Netflix. I think to a degree that some of Kenya Barris's work might have been doing some of that pandering, like you say. It might have been doing some of those things to really attempt to try to get like the American like mainstream public to really get to see us as humans that have just been through these particular circumstances. Now, whether you want to say that that's necessary or not as a Black person, we could definitely have that conversation.
Right.
But I do think that like all these things are kind of happening simultaneously. But the fact that some of us are being given Ava did Wrinkle in Time, right?
Right.
Wrinkle in Time, I really feel like was really important, right? And there was a lot going on. I'm in touch with a lot of nonprofits and stuff in the city, around, kids, right? And like their welfare and, the schools and all of these things. And, kids got taken to see Black Panther, right? But it was a huge portion of young girls in the city that got to see Wrinkle in Time for free. And got to sit at a Q&A and like discuss but I was hearing some conversations from, some Black women that were just giving some critiques of the film, that, the child that was in it, different conversations about like colorism and all of these things. I won't get too deep into them. But essentially you hear the conversations, but I think that as long as like the media exists in the space that it exists in for now, and as long as we're having some type of conversation, then like that is progress. Now, if we want to say that like we need more, I don't know, certain representations of ourselves that like lean more toward, I guess like non-liberal politics that would be more left-leaning, that's a conversation as well. But it's going to spark the conversation. So to a degree, I think I say all it is to say that it's necessary, I think, and it's kind of already been written that these types of programs like Blackish and these programs that might tend to pander to the white mainstream media would be put on TV just based on what our concerns is as a community. Because when we think about something like Oscar's So White, it's like, okay, but then like Green Book, wins. I mean, and all praise was due to Moonlight for sure, but people had like issues with Green Book, right? And there was a certain portion of people in our community that have a problem with Moonlight as well. And that's a whole conversation that I'm in the middle in, just as a straight Black man, and like, just in those conversations with other counterparts of our community who are straight.
Right.
I'm always in those conversations, right? And being on a certain side of that conversation is very important to me because I need all of us to be together in this thing.
Right.
But just long story short, I think that the conversations are happening, and if the conversations are happening to get people to be like more enlightened, again, more of those things are going to be written, and just the content is going to keep coming out, so we can keep just telling these stories to a degree. If that's fair,
No, I think that's completely fair too, because I think that's a part of the conversation that sometimes, at least the 13% of people that live on Twitter and shit,
yeah, exactly.
right, are talking about is just like, well, we're tired of seeing this, we're tired of doing this, blah 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 blah. We hear that conversation, but it also like makes me think too in terms of like how media has been used throughout the years. So we don't want to see something too radical like on television. So we won't see something like The Grapevine. We won't see that on TV unless it's curated in a very specific way where it's just like, ooh, this still makes white people and non-Black audiences feel safe to be in this space. Because it's almost, I guess it's like Black-splaining, I guess might be the best term for it.
It might be. It just might be, but
Right.
We need that sometimes.
Right. And I think it's like an interesting space because there's part of it where it makes white people feel comfortable to kind of be in on these conversations. But there's also another part of it where Black people and our participation sometimes in this anti-intellectual movement and shit that's going on right now, because that's sometimes like, I think we can handle like the challenge that something like The Grapevine or something like even Toni Morrison, like though she's widely digested and everybody's like, all right, do the bluest eye, but are we actually breaking down the conversation that's actually being had in a much greater totality around these different pieces of art that Black people have created. Because I even wonder back to like the Black Panther art and the aesthetics of that and the art that they were using to kind of push specific agendas. And I think that's a period of time that I think is like super powerful of just like, oh, here, now this is very concerted effort on what we want to be portrayed as well. So that's just I just ended up ranting about some things, but to get to that point of like the Black Panther imagery and how powerful that is.
Absolutely. And if I may, I had the opportunity of meeting Emory Douglas. So that's the thing. It's a whole thing, I'm really glad this is our topic for today, because there was a conference that took place here in Philadelphia called the Black Radical Tradition Conference at Temple University at the beginning of 2016. And, it was many names, familiar names that, y'all might know, like, Angela Davis spoke at this conference, Forreal West spoke at this conference. And the great, a lot of the young people spoke at this conference, and I had the opportunity of doing a panel myself on Black art, right? Kind of being like the key to Black resistance and our liberation. And the good news is that this whole entire conference, the whole thing, all 3 days are on YouTube. It's from 2016, Black Radical Tradition Conference, Temple University, right on YouTube. And, y'all can subscribe, save that, because it's all public record and it's all there. But Emory Douglas himself spoke at the last night of the conference, and his particular panel took place at the Church of the Advocate, which is on, I believe, 17th and Diamond in North Philly.
Nothing but down the street.
Yeah, okay, there we go, right? Shout out to North. But yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, man, just like seeing Emory's work from back then, and then like hearing the stories and just, the effort and just all of these things that these young men, right, were doing, and women were doing around the clock within the Black Panther Party. So yeah, that's definitely very important, because it was about art with the utmost intentionality. You know?
And can you tell our audience a little bit more about who Emory Douglas is, and just give a brief background, just in case this is a new name to anybody?
Absolutely. So Emory Douglas was pretty much like your minister of art for the Black Panther Party, and one of the editors for the newspaper. The way he did his art was really interesting, because again, we were talking about the Black Panther Party at that time, and of course they had all of the information or all of the knowledge dropped possible, right, in the issue or volume of the paper. But again, it had to come with certain images and things to really pull the people in. Again, when we talk about media, right, and them having messages in them to inform in these things. They went into it with the utmost, intentionality. And Emory Douglas, just him having a vision and having kind of like, how like music sounds and like music has a genre.
Right.
Emory Douglas's art is like its own like genre, right? It's like just like every artist's art, right? When we think about people like, Basquiat and Kahlo and all these people throughout the years. But, Emory Douglas, I believe, is in that same conversation. You know what I mean? It's like, it's amazing what he was able to create with just like construction paper and print in the 60s and 70s. So I really just urge everyone to search his name on Google, and you might come out with an iPhone screensaver or something, because the art is just truly that good, So Emory Douglas, Emory Douglas, Douglas. So just so the people get it right, because it's a real important artist, I think, in Black history who we hardly ever discuss.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with that one.
I appreciate you for letting me break that down, man, because Emory was a bad young dude, man. It's crazy.
Look, talk about it. Yeah, because that's somebody, when I was doing more of my studies and really just, that moment when you're coming into your Blackness and you're like learning all pieces that you can and absorbing everything. During my studies, it was really interesting to learn about him, because I really focused on like theater, but theater and violence, but more focused on like lynching dramas and like what that meant, and dismantling like minstrel shows and shit.
Absolutely.
So it's always been like interesting, just in terms of like how are Black people utilizing media and art to really reframe that narrative too, and dismantle these things that we're so used to. Like we're looking at the Mammy, the Jezebel, the Coon, the Pickaninny, and really just looking at it and just like, okay, these are the people in power who created these for us. Now, how are we either subverting them or completely dismantling a lot of these narratives? So I think that's another part of art that always like intrigued me, is like the art that happened to be Black versus like, nah, this is for us, this is by us, this is Black art. Right?
Yeah.
And I think those two are like a different kind of beast. So somebody like Emory Douglas is making Black art. Like here is something as, here's a vehicle, and this imagery is how we consume it as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, man, now I'm about to go back into that deep dive.
For sure, man. It's necessary.
No, I think so. So I'll make sure to like share that across all of my platforms, just his imagery, and especially like this portion of the conversation as well, because I think that's important. Now, how do you feel about utilizing this imagery in today's time a little bit more, and when we get like bigger artists? So we're thinking like the Kanye's, Beyonce's, Jay-Z's, and all of that. And utilizing these images, but also knowing that there's a clash potentially in like ideology when we critique these figures who are making like all this kind of money, but also talk about liberation in their music. How do you digest that in a kind of way, or how do you grapple with that duality?
It's quite a grapple, right? Because, you know, again, like being, you know, again, it's really interesting because, you know, I'm a kid from West Philly. I'm from West Park Projects, and literally being from like, you know, the bottom of like the economic, you know, totem pole in this country, being, you know, a Black kid from public housing, you know, you pretty much become like a microwave capitalist sometimes, right, depending on what happens. Because you want, you know, you see how you see the state that your community is in, and you're like, okay, like it's no other answer to this but trying to be able to access and hoard the same wealth that, you know, white people are, some, right, that are in that class. But growing up and realizing that, like, okay, like it's really, you know, it's I see why people have like come to those conclusions. But again, just like we were saying about the art, it's about the utmost intentionality. Like if I really want my people to really come up out of something, it's going to take a little bit more than just like making money, right?
Right.
But to your question, I really think that like sometimes, you know, it's about putting those, you know, it's like an old saying from down south about like, it's like sometimes putting the medicine, like sometimes putting candy inside of medicine, like how it's like a baby would take it or whatever, or a small child. And I think that's sometimes what happens when we think about a lot of the Western media that the people who get put on those platforms do. Like I remember it was a conversation around the Super Bowl, and I forget what number this is, and I'm on top of sports most times, but sometimes with dates and numbers I'm bad. But it was the second time when B performed at the Super Bowl with Bruno Mars. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And you know, did the whole you know, the outfits with the Black Panthers and stuff, and just the conversations around that. And I mean, you know, for one, I think that visibility is really important as well. Like if someone is like seen in something that makes a reference to something, that is important. Now, you know, someone who, well, I would just say that someone like Elaine Brown, right? Elaine Brown was a woman who was in the Black Panther Party as a young woman here in Philadelphia. And her response to, you know, the Beyonce thing, you know, here in the community was that like, yeah, we did what we did, but we necessarily didn't wear like fishnets or something to that degree. It was kind of like a comment that was like what some of us might call shade, coming from our elder good sis Elaine Brown of the Philadelphia Black Panther Party, formerly. So those are Elaine's comments, right? Now, when we look at the conversation that's taking place after that, it's kind of like, well, like did Beyonce disrespect the Black Panther Party? Should she have done something, or like, do we just like know the difference? Like, all right, be over here did like the cute Panther thing, but like we know what the real deal is. So I just think it was many sides of the conversation, but I think that at the end of the day, like sometimes you just need like that visibility, because I think we're living in the era where like people really need to do like a lot of their own homework, because a lot of times we do this thing as a people, like you talk about the anti-intellectual movement, we sometimes replace that with like, you know, the no days off, like capitalism, Black capitalism movement, right? And when we think about some of the things that's in that, it's all about getting your own money. It's all about getting your own this, getting your own that, getting your own that. But no one's out here really getting their own like knowledge.
Right.
And so when we need to depend on people like Beyonce for that, we're really it's a responsibility that we're asking. And maybe does want to answer that call, but we see that like the other things that Beyonce was able to follow up with were specifically speaking to like Black women after the performance. We talk about Lemonade and Homecoming and all of these powerful images. It's really powerful, and like Black women are fucking unstoppable right now, right? In terms of everything.
Talk about it.
That's what I'm saying. It's about like a image, right? So like B was seen in a black beret with the bullet belt and all of that. But then when, you know what I mean, she got on that front cover of Lemonade, right? But then when she got on that Coachella stage and she got like her own like sorority letters, like those images are powerful to her, to the people who she's speaking to. So right. I can't really say that Beyonce made a mistake. I think that like it's about, again, if you're going to perform within Western media, like, and do these things for the capitalist class, and you know your people are watching, and at this point in your career, you have that choice as like the most powerful brand in entertainment being Beyonce, and you can make that choice, do it, you know, because the girls, like the women, like they're going to get it, you know what I mean? Like, right. So that's a community that she's addressing. And we think about stuff like the Black Panther Party, we think like more masculine and more like, but it was women there too. But that was just like the elder sister's response, right?
Right.
But just the positionality that Beyonce is in, I really don't blame her for too much. It's just that like us as a people, we have to do our own homework as well when we talk about things like the Black Panther Party and things like that, because it's not B's job to give us the whole story necessarily, because right. The history is there.
Right.
So we're going to see these things all throughout media. I'm sorry, man. It's a really long conversation. And like, I'm
really enjoying this is feeding me today. After this long day, this is. So I'm hoping my audience is feeling the same way. I love these kind of conversations.
And it's interesting because like these conversations are so like long-winded and everything, and like having these conversations in public is a challenge for me, because like I'm a person that, you know, I used to have like a really like crazy speech impediment. Like I probably still do. It comes up every now and then. And like I didn't talk until I was about like 4 years old and things like that. And
wouldn't have ever guessed.
But it's like, you know, it's kind of a challenge, because it's like, man, how do I find the right words, and how do I like not like stumble all over myself? But again, it's about like learning every day too, because like I don't always have the right answers for these things. I just know what might be right in the end. But right. Then in the meanwhile, like in between time, like how do we get there? And those, I think, are the questions that we're answering every day. Like we know what it looked like when we want to score that touchdown. We know what scoring a touchdown looked like.
Right.
What play are we going to use? What formation out of the playbook we're going to use? Those questions are what we answering. Are we going to call an audible? Are we going to send this guy in motion? And I hate using a sports analogy, but that's literally like what it's about. It's about knowing you're going to get them points, but how we get there, and just discussing that in the meantime.
Nah, and I appreciate like all of that you even dissected, because I think one, the imagery is always important, and like what comes after that imagery, like, and I think that's pretty much something I can say is pretty consistent in terms of Beyonce once she started leveraging her own creative stuff. So even like when you were talking about the X earlier, I was already thinking, I was like, there's definitely there's an aerial shot during that formation performance of them in that X. And I thought that, I was like, that's fire. And so for me, I saw that, I said, oh shit. For the listeners, I just like looked off to the side and was like bug-eyed and shit.
Yeah.
But I was like, shit, because I was like, oh wow, like I get what that is, because that's Malcolm X right there. And even like using her blatant image of being a Black woman, and disrupting these spaces that have been traditionally white and filled with white supremacy. So the NFL, even the Louvre and being in there, Coachella and those kind of things. I think it's very specific kind of intentionality behind it, which I think is important. Is like when you're talking about using art with intention. But then even as you went on in the conversation too, is this idea of getting there, and that we know what the end goal is. We know what we want to get to. We know what this looks like. But it's really just that work in between, and knowing like picking and choosing the imagery you're going to use, and that's just even picking the person. Like Coretta Scott King and Bayard Rustin weren't going to be the pick, but they knew Martin was the man to do it at that time. And they even know just the power of that image in itself. So I think that's something for us as a community, and this is even outside of art, but if we're going to make a collective move, is really trying to figure out like what does that work there look like? What kind of discourse makes sense when we're having these moments that will still ultimately leverage us somewhere else? And I think that's the part of the conversation sometimes in our current day, because like woke Twitter and just having more access to these intellectual conversations and them not always living in an echo chamber. I think that's the cool part about it too, is like, all right, we can disagree here, but is our disagreement still maintaining like, here's how we get to the end of it at this time? Is this disagreement going to ultimately lead to liberation, or is this disagreement just going to be like, you're blocked, canceled, you can go and move to the side? And that's something I've been like thinking about more and more lately, is just like, all right, can we continue to have like this discourse, or do we know how to properly engage in discourse with ending that would still be positive for all Black people, essentially, is what I was really trying to gather, especially like from your last point, is like, what formation are we picking this time? All right, that makes sense. Let's move.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think social media is really interesting because, and I still have an interesting relationship with it. And like, I just know like in present times, like I know for me, right? I can only speak for myself. I in my spare time, I write, right? That's really what I am first. I'm like a writer first, really before the organizing, really before sports. I got some athletic experience in, elementary, some in high school, but I'm really a writer first, and a lot of my writing was like some poetry stuff, some this, some that, but a lot of it was about like, short story stuff, and I kind of wanted to explore like satire and like comedy writing to a degree, and while still trying to get at some type of truth. And I think like that's at a certain point in my adulthood and knowing like, especially now that like I'm really trying to like hone in on being like independent all the way, like with media. Really trying to like run my Twitter account as if it's like how like the Onion is, right? Like the satire and like, and I realized that like it was interesting because people started to engage me differently, like when I was like joking,
right?
And not joking like on someone or like trying to be like an asshole necessarily, but really like pointing out like something about like the absurdity about our society.
Absurdist, yeah.
And like just trying to get people to think about it. And I just saw like how people started to respond, and then I just started to see like who followed, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of just like a tactic that I want to use to like pull in. And then there are those times in which like you actually want to like, involve yourself in the real discourse, and sometimes in which you definitely have to. And I just think it really, at the end of the day, like for social media, like for when it's about like violence and like that fun we have, and also that discourse too. And also in the middle of that, I guess having some type of patience. And I mean, especially around this time where we can't be like face to face, right?
Right.
It's just really about that patience that like it's really just about the patience that we are willing to have with one another.
Right.
At this point. And I mean, I have these things going on like with my folks, my own family, that I try to explain certain things to and catch them up to speed on certain things that we should be up to speed by now in this 2020.
Right.
But again, we still in them conversations, and it's really just about like patience, and that patience is about love, right? And it's about like love of community and, being Black and all of that good stuff, man. But it's like you said at the beginning, it's a grapple,
No, that's a fact. I think that's a lot, because I know I'm going to probably just have you back for other conversations, because I know there's more topics that we can definitely have.
For sure.
Because I was like, you're definitely one of them people I'll talk to you for 2 hours and not even realize it.
Yeah, because it's funny, because especially with my Twitter, and it's like once I started to get the messaging out the way in which I wanted to get it, I'm like, okay, I'm not, this is about like a few years ago, which I started the way in which I was like interacting with people on Twitter. And I'm just like, nobody's really going to hear me. They're just going to see me as like some like, some a-hole on Twitter that's just like angry and Black. But I was like, no, like some of this stuff has a point, and like I think it entertains me. Like it's really for me, and not really like
right.
So it's just one of those things where it's like I'm okay with this being like out to the public. You know what I mean? Like, and it's not necessarily like it's just about information sharing from a certain personality. It kind of just like characterizing the information that you're giving. Because I know a lot of times, like I talk about things like the Soviet Union, right? And I'm a Black person that's like talking about the Soviet Union, and like, yo, like the boy from the Soviet Union was like, you know, he was drippy, or like relating something about the Soviet Union, the black culture. And I know a lot of times people be like, what the fuck is this boy talking about? But I'm just really trying to get people to just like pay attention, you know what I mean? And just like to just see, because in the long run, I think like someone like you like found out what I'm trying to get at here. So yeah, man, I mean, it's all in good fun, but at the same time, it's all about like information sharing. So I definitely appreciate you, man, for sure.
No, I definitely appreciate you. Like I said from the beginning, like you're somebody that I've grown to respect in the digital space, and just your movement that you have, because I was like, who's this person? Lorenzo Forreal? I don't know who this is. But you made me, no, but it was dope because I was thinking in a different way. And I think that's also important, is like you add a specific perspective that, you know, sometimes Black Twitter, we can live in an echo chamber of all the Black intellectuals and Black academics and stuff. But you add a specific nuance that still challenges, and it's just jarring enough. And jarring is not the word I want to use all the way, but that's it. Did I just get frozen in that position? Sure did.
I still hear you loud and clear. I can't.
We out here. But yeah, I think that's just another portion of it. So thank you for adding these different perspectives. Thanks you for adding the nuance of this conversation. And thank you for just being you, because I think you're educating in a way that's still fun. You're educating in a way that's still critical, that still challenges people. And I'm more than honored to have you on this platform, because, man.
I definitely appreciate it. I definitely do.
Nah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. And yeah, you know, I'm just, you know, just keep on trying to do these good things, because, you know, it's certain projects audio wise that I want to do. And I definitely would love to have you on those. And you know, all that stuff would definitely be like siphons, you know, through my own Twitter account. If anybody wants to give me a little try, please follow at your own discretion, no pressure.
10 out of 10 recommend.
Thank you, Quise. Thank you. Lorenzo Forreal, Lorenzo Forreal. And just real quick, man, I know this is about like media and stuff like that. But I was just thinking, it's funny because with the whole like media thing and TV and stuff, people often ask me like where I got like my name, like what is like Lorenzo Forreal about? And just first and foremost, I think that just like for real was just this thing that like people just in Philly say in general, just like as like a thing. So I decided to spell it like that. But I got it from, I feel like it's like one of my biggest, like I think, writing influences. And I just want to just, you know, shout him out. Rest in peace to Charlie Murphy. When he was on an episode of Martin, and if anybody's interested, this is going to be season 3, episode 14. When Martin tries to basically, or better yet, when his producers try to give him a better look on his show, they try to make him more conservative. And in the credits, Charlie Murphy is listed as Brother Forreal. Like, that's his name in the credits in that episode, because he's basically like an audience member that comes to Martin's show. And it's like the cheerleader of Martin's show and is always potentially saying some real shit. So that was just like the idea for that, and that's where I got that from.
Yo, I'm based with that origin story.
yeah. That's what that's about. Cause cause you know, they like, I just want to give people a reason for why they might be typing in Lorenzo Forreal if they do. But I'm sorry, I might have misspelled it on the first, but it's, you know, Lorenzo Forreal. So yeah, but that's where that comes from. And yeah, I'm just thankful that somebody like Charlie Murphy was able to do his thing in writing and all of that, even though he had a successful brother and everything like that. But yeah, man, I just had to put that out there for y'all.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. Keep it with people, for real. No, once again, thank you for coming onto this platform. I'll make sure to share you across. I'm probably just gonna get this episode edited and out by tomorrow, and call it a day. But once again, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you. Look forward to having you back on again in the future, because this ain't the only time we having a conversation.
For sure.
But yeah, no, definitely. So anything else you want to share with the listeners? Where else they can find you? Other platforms that you're on? Are you good?
I mean, I'm definitely on Instagram. I definitely want to get that building up a little bit more. I'm going to definitely try to share some more of my pictures on Instagram in these last few years of organizing and things, and just different things that I was doing around the country and traveling. I just want to share some of those things in these next few years, since I'm going to kind of be like tucked in and being like a house journalist for the next few years, being an independent guy, trying to make my own money. But yeah, it should all work out. But definitely Lorenzo Forreal on Instagram and Twitter. Yeah, man, I definitely appreciate this, Quise. This has been beautiful. And I just want to definitely only thing else I have left to spread is just peace and love to my people. So I definitely appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man. I'm gonna talk to you soon. I'm gonna get this stuff edited and relax for the rest of my night.
Absolutely, brother. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely, Quise. Love.
Much love.